So let's get started with today's webinar. So for the people who are on today and who don't know me yet, I'm Bo from Nexmosphere, and I help our customers with digital signage and POS projects that use shopper senses and effects like video and lighting to make in-store experiences interactive and, very important, memorable. And the very special reason that we are here today is because building these interactive presentations has gotten even easier, since recently 2 Nexmosphere partners have synced up together, and they are now able to offer both their strengths to all Nexmosphere users. So that's why we're on here today. And Nexmosphere has been working with BrightSign as our digital signage player partner for years now, and we partnered with Intuiface and for their elaborate content creation and management software as well. But there was one setback though, because you couldn't use both in the same project. But now you can, so that's why we are here. Both partner brands can be used in the key digital signage markets where Nexmosphere products are being installed. So the biggest one, as you probably know, is retail, but it can also be used in very niche markets, like for example, in musea or trade show events. So, well, as you can see, we're here also with Jeffrey Besson from Intuiface. And Jeffrey is going to tell us more about Intuiface and how to use it. And also, he's going to give us an idea of how to build beautiful interactive presentations, not just simply, but also fast, using Nexmosphere sensors and controllers, Intuiface software, and BrightSign players. So Jeff, very happy to have you on and to be able to see you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here from the confines of my home, like everybody else. The trouble with these times, of course, is there's no way to proactively kind of fight the challenge. Our main weapon is patience and try to wait this thing out, and that can be very frustrating. Forces us sometimes to focus on less important things because they needle at us. I know for me, for example, you can't tell, this is my own personal struggle. I have a giant afro in my head. You can't tell because I have tons of product taming my 1970s afro. I can't get a haircut. And so this little tiny thing, this is not important, but it strains me greatly. This is what happens when you're stuck inside all day. You worry about dumb things like that. So hopefully I can distract everybody a little bit by introducing you to Intuiface. I wanted you to see that I'm a real person, but we'll spend most of the time on the content that I'm presenting. This is an opportunity for me to help you understand who Intuiface is. It is probably not the typical type of software you're familiar with. It is certainly not typical like any other traditional digital signage platform. It is different. Now, some of you might be using Nexmosphere by coding with your hands, your hand coding. Others of you might be taking advantage of integrations with platforms like BrightSign. I will show you how this works in Intuiface. Here's the thing. Intuiface was created, it was invented to deal with interactivity. And this was now about 7-8 years ago. So for almost a decade, Intuiface from day one has been focused on making any kind of interactivity accessible to any creative team, regardless of skill set. So that certainly includes touch, that's true, but we mean any kind of interactivity, and that also means active and passive interactivity. Nexmosphere is a perfect example of that, of providing a set of sensors that can either be activated passively, like motion, there's no explicit action to activate it, just person walk by, or active integration like buttons. All these types of interactions fall underneath the Intuiface umbrella, and we try to make it as easy as possible for you to build out scenarios using these events in the field, in the world, in the environment around your deployments, in ways that can help you curate digital content or make other things happen. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to go to the slides here. So you may not have heard of us, but the market certainly has. So as of today, we have over 1,600 customers in 70 countries across a variety of verticals. Another way we're sort of different from a traditional digital signage platform is we don't sell templates or pre-built apps, and you don't really use us as a means of assigning content to zones. You control every single pixel of a design with Intuiface. You don't buy the pre-built Wayfinder app. You don't purchase the capability of assigning content to zones. You control every single pixel using your own media, your own images, videos, documents, 3D models, websites, audio files, etc. It's your own storyboards, it's your own layouts. What you're creating is interactive content to generate engagement in any environment, any physical space, for any purpose. So it could be a digital sign, could be a curated art exhibit, it could be some retail point of sale application, or a training catalog, or a trade show kiosk deployment. All of these things can be created with Intuiface, and you can incorporate different types of interactivity like Nexmosphere without writing code. Let's talk a little bit about our value proposition. So I'm going to give you a demo, but I want to talk a little bit about the value proposition. So what makes Intuiface special? Well, at the end of the day, our elevator pitch is this. It's a no-code platform dedicated to the creation, integration, deployment, and analysis of interactive digital experiences. Integrating, deploying, and analyzing. We're going to walk through those things. But particularly for any creative team, certainly a digital agency or a systems integrator, but it could be some sort of creative team in-house, like a marketing team for a large corporation. We promise unsurpassed ease and speed for digitally transforming the physical space. It's not about mobile phones, it's not about websites, it's about that physical space. So we enable you to incorporate all different kinds of human-machine interactivity without writing code. There's multi-touch, there's sensors like Nexmosphere, speech, computer vision, all of these things can be incorporated in your experiences. We enable you to create very sophisticated, interactive, and responsive workflows at the edge without coding. At the edge meaning in the physical space, on the device, in the store, at the trade show, in the museum, in the school, right? You can make it very responsive and reactive. It's like writing code, but it's not writing code. As I mentioned, you control every single pixel of the design, and you can establish real-time connections to any cloud-accessible data source, service, or device. That's this integration piece I mentioned in the elevator pitch. Particularly, a great example are REST web services. There's hundreds of thousands of REST web services now. If you're not familiar with a web service, at the end of the day, web services exist to enable one piece of software to talk to another piece of software in the cloud, okay? So for example, the Philips Hue light bulb. It's a light bulb, but it's connected to your network. It has an IP address. It has an API. You can talk to the light bulb. Well, Intuiface automates the creation of integrations with any web service. It could be some back office ERP application, could be a database, could be any third-party cloud-hosted service, restaurant reservations, weather, flight status. All of these things are available, and you can, with no coding, create integrations to these services. You have real-time information on screen. There's a whole other piece about analytics, about collecting and analyzing the data you collect at the screen. One of the beauties of interactivity is you have things you can capture, right? You know what they touched. If you have a camera, you know it's a 30-year-old female. If there was a sensor, you know when they got there, and you can measure dwell time. All of this information can be collected and used to help you get a better understanding of your audience, maybe to get better insight about their preferences, and maybe ways to improve the deployment to make it more effective. And finally, we also believe that with Intuiface, we ensure that you can trust that your information, the information that is touching Intuiface at any point, is confidential, the integrity is maintained, and it's highly secure. We can promise this because we're a month away from formally being ISO 27001 certified. This is a big deal, and it's a big deal for us even, because Intuiface will get 5-page documents from an IT organization, and we have to go through it line by line. Do you do this with passwords? Do you do this with data? When we have ISO 27001 certification, we just give them the certificate and we're done. So it's a promise from us that our infrastructure will protect all the information of yours that we touch. And if you haven't thought about it now, your IT organization this is going to become more and more important. This assurance with things like GDPR that everything is safe and secure and we can promise that. So to the Intuiface user, well, at the end of the day, why does this matter? What are the benefits? Well, we've done studies, and it is absolutely true. If you compare custom coding to what you can build with Intuiface, it's 80% cheaper and 60% faster. Really, 80% cheaper and 60% faster, because you're not writing code. I mean, it's not rocket science that it should be faster. We're telling you it is a lot faster, and of course, that makes it also a lot cheaper. Which at the end of the day means you'll have higher margins. But let's walk through some of the results. Real cool thing about Intuiface, you can use it to prototype, right? So this isn't even about, you built something, it's in the field. It's just rapidly throwing something together. Maybe it's pre-sales, or maybe you're just with your boss and you're kind of brainstorming a little bit. You can use Intuiface for that, to prototype these ideas. And if you are selling something, it speeds up that cycle, because your prospects are seeing what you're going to do. It also gives you instant feedback. Again, you're not writing code. You don't have to write a whole bunch of framework content to make sure that anything runs. You can do two things and you have a running experience in Intuiface, and I'll show you that. So you get instant feedback. For agencies and integrators, it vastly increases your scale, because you can just do more stuff, right? Maybe you have lots of small and mid-size projects that you can kind of templatize and rapidly iterate through with Intuiface. And then your large-scale customers, maybe a custom code, maybe you still do it, or you use Intuiface, but it's a more involved process. You also have agility post-deployment. For the same reason you have agility pre-deployment. It's easy to make changes, and it's easy to test them. And if you're an agency or integrator, your customers are going to love you, because you're rapidly making changes and showing it to them and say, is this what you meant? Should we tweak this? Should we move this over here? And you know requirements are going to change. So Intuiface makes it easy to adapt. And again, finally, if you're selling a service, because we reduce costs, because we reduce time to market, that means you can reduce your selling price, still make this big margin, even though you're very competitively priced. And at the end of the day, it improves customer relationships, because you exceeded expectations, you exceeded the timeline, you were very cost competitive, and you're very responsive, right? You can easily make changes. And by the way, for what it's worth, if your customer isn't happy, they can take the work with them. There's sort of that built-in assurance. They say, look, if I don't do a good job, you can take it with you. Whereas if it's custom code, they can't go anywhere, which used to be a great business model, right? They're locked in, they can't go anywhere. But if you want to improve the customer relationship, that's one way to do it, which is to say it's portable. So if you think about Intuiface as a whole, what is in the Intuiface family, this diagram you see on screen is called the marketecture. It's sort of the marketing architecture, the non-technical architecture. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this now, but if you look at your screen, on the left you can see the tool we call Composer. That's the editor where you build your interactive experiences. Notice it runs only on Windows. So some of you might, be Mac people. You can do that. Got to first run Windows on the Mac. But it's a Windows-based tool enabling you to build your interactive experiences. I'm going to show you that in the demo. On the right is Player. Oh, and that's an older image. This should be updated. On our website, I'm going to show you on our website that we have BrightSign in there as well. So let's get back to that in the meantime. So we have Player, which is the runtime. It runs on the device. It plays the experience you build in Composer. That runs on 7 platforms. And let's get to, and I will show you in the finished diagram. This is why it's good to do webinars in real time. So here on our website, intuiface.com, under the product menu, I'm going to Overview. And here we have our latest architecture. And you can see on the right, there's BrightSign. So you can run Player on any of 7 different platforms, including BrightSign, including Android, as well as Windows and others. This is where you're connecting your Nexmosphere sensors, of course. This is the in-the-field deployment. So you're building in Composer, you're running on Player. There's a whole bunch of cloud-hosted infrastructure to support things like remote deployment and analytics. And then as well as in the bottom third of this diagram, that's all about the integration to APIs, REST web services, that sort of thing. So if we go back to the slide, if you look at the bottom, for us, Nexmosphere is an example of the Internet of Things. It's sensors at the edge, collecting information, communicating that information. So that's where we capture it. Again, we support just about any kind of interactivity you can think of, and Nexmosphere is a perfect example. So let's do a quick demonstration of Composer in action. So on screen right now, we have an experience that you can actually download in our what we call the marketplace. So we have over 50 free pre-built samples that you can download to see what's possible. You know, Intuiface at the end of the day is Lego blocks. It's a finite number of Lego blocks that can be combined in an infinite number of ways, just like Lego. This example is not a template we sell. It's just taking the Lego blocks to tell a story. In this case, it's an art exhibit. So for example, if I touch nature, it transitions me to this, what we call in the product, we call it an asset flow of images. And if I touch one of these images, it will pop out a copy. You see that? Okay. So there's lots of different capabilities in this experience. Notice this is not a digital sign. Although at the end of the day, if I can touch a sign, is it a sign? Is it a kiosk? The distinction is kind of meaningless. I want to just show you how to build that very simple scenario where I have a set of buttons. I touch a button. I navigate to a scene with an asset flow of images, this gallery of images. And if I touch an image, I can pop it out and interact with it. So here you are looking at Composer. I have a brand new experience, which means if you look up top, there's only one scene in my experience. You use scenes to sort of organize your content. Your audience has no idea what scene they're on, but I'm using this to organize my content. And what I'm going to do here is first add a background. Notice this is a 1920 by 1080 image. My experience was created for such a screen. You can have any dimension screen you want, okay? Any pixel width, any pixel height. Could be, if you're using Windows PCs, could be a multi-screen display wall. But with BrightSign, it could be any size, 2K, 4K, 8K. You can do what you want. If you look at your screen, I'm going to set this as my, I'll make this my experience background. So this means that all of the scenes in my experience by default will have the same background. Do you see what I mean by you control every single pixel of your experience? Now, if you have Photoshop, right, you can create some digital content in Photoshop. Intuiface lets you drag and drop Photoshop files into Composer and automatically imports them as PNGs. So maybe you built this inside Photoshop. So there's my background. I'm going to have two buttons. In the example, there were three, but here there's two. So let me organize these two buttons. Intuiface is a what you see is what you get editor. So let's reduce the width and the height a little bit. There we go. So everything I do here is how it's going to look on screen. Okay. I'm also going to add a text asset, simple text. So the text asset will contain the title, which on the right I can do Steel Frames Collection. I could have done it right here in the canvas, but it's black on black. That's not very helpful. So now we're making that white on black, and I'll choose, I like this particular, let's see, we'll do Portico regular, and then we'll make the font, I don't know, 90. There we go. So there we have our title. And then I'll grab one more image, which is the button in the upper left-hand corner, which is this guy. Could be PNG, could be GIF, animated GIF, JPEG. I mean, you have lots of options. This is going to be sort of just our logo in the upper right. Okay. So right now I have the beginning of my experience. I have two buttons. I have a title, background image. I also have my logo. If you remember, tapping one of these buttons navigated me to a new scene. Well, we only have one scene right now, so let's duplicate this. So now I have a second scene. I can rename these things, by the way, but I'll keep the scene 1, scene 2 for now. So now we're on scene 2. And here I'm going to change this to the nature collection. Like so. Of course, these buttons are no longer relevant. We need our gallery of images. Let me go back to File Explorer. Remember, Intuiface runs on Windows. Here's our, hold on, our 10 images. So I've highlighted 10 images, happen to be JPEG, and I'm dragging them into the scene. Okay. I'm going to right-click these things and add them into what we call a group. So this is not a tutorial, it's a demo, so just bear with me here, but I'm creating a group and then changing that group into an asset flow. Okay, so this is one type of visualization for multiple items in an experience. And now I'm using the WYSIWYG editor to change how this looks. And we're going to spend some time on the right in the properties panel. The properties panel is where I can modify the properties, where I can constrain and configure everything in my experience to make sure it looks just right. I know I want this to be, I've already written down all the parameters I need. Depending on what you're building, you might obviously have to tweak these things. And of course, we need to make this stuff bigger. So we'll do 608. That looks pretty good. See these arrows on the bottom? Those arrows at the bottom let me, instead of swiping, which I can do, and I'll show you swiping, but you can also tap the buttons, but I don't need that. So on the right side, see where it says show controls in the bottom right there? I'm going to deselect that, and now the controls are gone. Stay with me on the right. One other thing, I'm going to go to the container behavior category here, and on the bottom right, see tap item to open? See that property in the bottom right? Click. Okay. Let me, let's do just a couple other things, which is to facilitate navigation. First of all, this button in the upper left, when I tap that, I want to go back to the table of contents scene, okay? I want to trigger a navigation to the original scene. So that logo in the upper right, I'm right-clicking it. I'm selecting Add a Trigger in the bottom of the pop-up menu. And it's saying when that logo is tapped, then do something. This is programming, folks, but programming in a way anybody can do it. Now, in this case, when the logo is tapped, then watch my screen, then scene-to-scene navigation, go to the scene, name scene 1. I didn't rename the scene. I could have called it the intro scene, but just scene 1. And that's it. Any trigger can call any action. There's hundreds of triggers in Intuiface, hundreds of actions in Intuiface. If you want to navigate from one scene to the other, you call a scene-to-scene navigation action. Let me go back to scene 1. This nature button should take me to the next scene, right? If I touch the nature button, I go to the nature scene. Right click, you know how to do this now, right? Add a trigger. When that button is tapped, then scene-to-scene navigation, go to the scene named scene 2, okay? Let's play this. Later, I'm going to show you how to build a Nexmosphere-based lift and learn scenario using Intuiface. So here's my experience. I have two options. I'm going to tap nature. And now I'm at the nature collection. I can swipe through that asset flow of images, and either whichever one I type, tap item to open, and now it's open. If I click the image in the upper left or tap it with my finger, I'm back to the beginning. Isn't that easy? Now again, these are building blocks, and there's tons of building blocks we haven't looked at. A couple more I'll introduce you to later. All of them can be combined to tell any story using any type of interactivity to any audience in any environment. Super simple, and you have 100% design freedom. Let me go back to the slides. And I believe, Bo, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next couple moments.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think you can also see me right now. At least I can see myself on the screen. So I hope you can too. So it was really good to see how fast and easy you can do that within Intuiface job. And a really good reminder of how fast and easy that is also for myself. And I also wanted to give the people that are listening today and watching today, a quick reminder of the different type of elements that you can use from the Nexmosphere platform. So by looking at the graph that you see on your screen here, I'll just go through it really quickly, and then also just like Job did, just jump into an example right away. So what you see here is a selection of the elements that we have, and we call the collection of our sensors and of our actuators, we call those elements. And as you can see, there's many different kinds in our portfolio. We haven't even listed all of them on this picture, but this is just to give you an idea. And you can compose lots of different shopper journeys. And we do this by simply mixing and matching the right elements for the experience. So as you do that within the presentation that you make within Intuiface, you do the same on the hardware side, right? So you choose what kind of hardware you need to get to the experience that you want to build for your customers, for your clients. Now, let's have a look at the next slide, John. So on that slide, that's the example that I wanted to talk to you about. It's not a standard example. That's also why I wanted to throw it in there. So Joff is going to show us a lift and learn example later. I decided to also show you something completely else, something that maybe you haven't seen as much from us before. So this is an interactive digital signage installation that you could also put in, build yourself. And in these kind of applications, so you've got a screen hanging somewhere, and the goal that we have here is to really draw somebody's attention in, and to draw them into the message, you know, that we want to convey, that we want to show on that screen. So another goal that we have is to lengthen the time that they spend looking at our message and not at the other messages that might be around. At the same time, we want to make sure that this person, this shopper, or this this visitor feels serviced in a way that's not overwhelming and that's not pushy. So in order to do this, we can help them, and we can help them select between products or between the type of information that they see that they want to get on the screen that we have installed there. And we do this by targeting our message to the right audience, and also by giving them funneled info, or to give them selection options in terms of which info they want to see by offering button choices. And in this example, you'll see two sensors that we've combined here. So as I said, mix and match your hardware to go with the presentation that you want to build. So you see a proximity sensor here. That's the sensor in the middle, the black sensor in the middle. And this sensor can detect whether somebody is standing in front of your presentation, and it can also see how far away from the sensor that person is standing or walking past. So you could design your Intuiface presentation so that if somebody is detected at a distance, the integrated lighting in these push buttons that you see on the right, for example, they start glowing, and that glowing will attract that person and catch their attention, so they want to have a closer look, right? So at this point, it's very important to start triggering really engaging content, you know, so you build your presentation within Intuiface that looks very professional. Start using that content now. So whenever that this shopper or this user walks towards your screen, the proximity sensor will also detect that they are coming closer, right? So another thing that you could do at this point is that you could, in your presentation, build in that these buttons are being showed on the screen at this time. So somebody is further away, these buttons start glowing, somebody walks towards your screen, and you show touch buttons on the screen with these options. In the case that you're not using a touch screen, you can also just give them the options by showing the indications of the LED rings in the buttons that you're using there. So this way, you know, we already get some input from our users. And within this presentation, or within this setup, this hardware setup, we're also using a gender recognition sensor, right? So it's the largest sensor, by the way, that you see on the left side. And this sensor can trigger gender as well as age-relevant content. So, and it can do so from quite a distance, so from 2.5 meters. And this really allows you to choose which message that you want to convey to what person, right? So do you want to maybe trigger a gender-specific content or age-related content? Maybe you want to show different content to a person that's 30 than to a person that's 50. So these are all choices that you get using this software and, well, using our hardware and the software within Intuiface. So this is just one example, right, of how you can use these different elements, so the hardware plus Intuiface Composer, to create your own specific experience, as we call it. And on the next slide, if we can turn over to that. So these are just some pictures of other applications that we build. Obviously, it's not possible for us in this 50 minutes or 1 hour lasting webinar to go through all of them. So if you would like to see some more of this and then in a visual way, you can also head over to our YouTube channel where we have listed a bunch of videos explaining standard and also some less standard applications. You can use these videos for yourself, right? So have a look at those to see what kind of presentations you can build. Also, if your customers are interested in building something interactive, but you're not sure how to present it to them, you can also use these videos to start talking with them about interactivity. And because you can build setups and presentations really fast and easily with Intuiface, right after showing a video and having an interested customer, you can start building and showing them videos that you've recorded yourself, with presentations that you've built with Intuiface. But we'll talk a bit more about that later, about how to get started as well. So one last thing that I want to mention before I head over back to Job is analytics, right? So Job is going to tell us much more about this a little bit later on, but I just wanted to remind you that all the triggers that you're getting from the sensors, so every trigger message coming from every Nexmosphere sensor is stored and is stored on the hardware that you're using. So on the BrightSign player, for example, that you're using. And with using Intuiface, you can do something with that data. So you can extract that data and make it very visual. And because you have all of this information already coming in, because you're using these sensors to create an interactive presentation, you can, very easily also have a second selling point, let's say, to your customers, which is selling them the information, whether this presentation that you built is actually working for them in store, or maybe it's not, but at least it's valuable information to have. So keep that in mind, and now we'll head back over to Job, and he'll explain a bit more about that in bits.
Thank you, Bo. We love Nexmosphere. They're not the only company producing sensors and actuators, but it's the company we chose to work with, to build a native integration with, because of how easy they make it to communicate information from a wide variety of sensors and to a wide variety of actuators. It's been very helpful for our install base, who wants to adopt things like lift and learn, but they don't have large budgets. They don't have very long timelines necessarily, and by working with Nexmosphere, it's a very simple, trivial integration, which again I'm going to show you in a moment. What I'm discussing now on screen is just a high-level look at how the integration works. Let me explain it, and then I will show you it. Intuiface has an over 400 article online help center. It's a very well-documented product. We update it daily. Support.intuiface.com. Free to access. And we have an article dedicated to working with Nexmosphere, everything you need to know to work with Nexmosphere sensors and actuators with Intuiface. It's all centered around the notion of an interface asset. An interface asset is this general idea in Intuiface representing an interface with some third-party thing. Intuiface has a lot of out-of-the-box integrations with third-party things. We also document how you can build them yourself. For example, for a REST web service, there's a tool that will automatically generate that integration for you, automatically creating a new interface asset. But the one for Nexmosphere is available out of the box. It's just in the product. In Composer, there's something called the Interface Assets panel, and what you're doing is you're adding the Nexmosphere interface asset. Again, it's out of the box. You just have to pick it. And the only thing you need to do is tell us which port to listen for, which on BrightSign, I think invariably is port 2. So you're configuring the Intuiface Nexmosphere interface asset to listen to port 2. If some of you are aware, Nexmosphere is a serial port over USB. So there's a USB cable. On BrightSign, it's invariably port 2, And so you put in port 2, Now composer, and thus player, running an experience, will know to listen to port 2. That's the only thing you have to do, and then you're done. What you're ultimately doing is you're sending and receiving Xscript commands. Again, I'll show you how that's done, but the only other thing you need to know other than configuring port 2 is the Xscript command language. There's nothing else you need to really figure out in Intuiface. You can call any Xscript command. You can receive and parse any Xscript command sent by a sensor or actuator, and you can respond to all things in real time. So other than putting the number 2 in a box, all you need to know is Nexmosphere, which you're doing anyway, understanding their Xscript command language, which is very simple. And what's nice is it's consistent from one sensor and actuator to the other. The syntax is the same, and so it's pretty easy to adopt. If you're doing analytics, if you look at your screen here, what's happening is, see the when? On the upper left, there's a when. This when, that's the trigger. Remember, we did triggers and actions, so that's the trigger. It's listening for a particular command. In this case, and again, if you're familiar with Xscript command language, you know you can break it down into 4 components. We're listening for an address of 1 and a command of 17, which in this case means a button was pressed. Okay, if you know the Xscript command language, if there's a button on address 1 sending a command of 17, that means the button was pressed. So the experience is listening, hey, did address 1 just send a command of 17? Ah, it did. That means a button was pressed. Look at the then at the top. Then show a circle. So we're drawing a circle around a stylized image of the button. Of course, you can do an infinite number of things if a button is pressed, but here we're just drawing a circle on the screen. And we're logging an event. Intuiface has very extensive analytics capabilities. I mentioned that to you before, where you can collect any information you want and visualize that information to learn more about your audience, identify trends, that sort of thing. Here we're logging an event. In this case, the details aren't here, but the details are, oh, a button was pressed. Okay. Intuiface also includes a charts and dashboards feature. You even build your own charts and organize those charts across a set of dashboards. So if you're brand new to analytics, we've given you everything you need to know and everything you have to do to build these charts showing real-time dashboards about what's happening with your deployments. So you can see here, we're combining the usual trigger action syntax for reacting to events noticed by Nexmosphere sensors, for example, and combining it with analytics. So what I'm going to do is open up an experience that's available to all of you for exploring our integration with Nexmosphere. We have another sample experience, so I'm not going to save this work. There's a whole, this is called Steel Frames in our marketplace. You can find it. See on screen in Composer, you have this 4-tabbed experiences panel. Composer is free to evaluate, by the way, 100% of capability for free. You can download Composer, build anything you want. When you run it, you're going to see these 4 tabs. And on the Marketplace tab, you'll find, for example, if I type steel, there's the finished example of the Steel Frames photo exhibition. In this case, I'm going to type in Nex, and here is the experience we have created, enabling you to explore our integration with Nexmosphere. This was created to work with the XN04 demo kit. With Nexmosphere's XN04 demo kit, we also have ambitions to work with the XN03. We're just not doing it yet. You could do it yourself. We just didn't pre-build it for the XN03. We did pre-build it for the XN04, which looks like this. So that's what the XN04 demo kit looks like. You can see here where I'm circling, there's the controller, and then there's a set of elements connected to that controller, and this black cable is the USB cable that's going to go to your BrightSign device or whatever is using with Nexmosphere. And there's buttons, and there's RFIDs, and there's a pickup sensor, and there's a light strip, and all of these things are available in the demo kit, and we have pre-built an integration with that demo kit. Let me explain to you how easy it is to build something like Lift and Learn. So if you look in the bottom right, there's an RFID pickup sensor. You see that? So there's a block that you get with a demo kit with an RFID tag on it. And you can put it down on that sensor, and the demo kit will go, oh, a tagged object has been put down, or if you lift it up, a tagged object has been lifted. That's Lift and Learn, right? Or Place and Learn. I mean, it could work either direction. How would you build that in Intuiface? Well, remember I told you about that Nexmosphere interface asset? I've clicked the interface assets button at the top of Composer. It's this one I'm circling right here. And if you look left, you'll notice that in the list of interface assets used in this experience, there's the Nexmosphere, right? I'm going to first click this little icon on the left that says the X-ray panel. This was actually built for a USB, an Android device. So in this case, that's the information. Or maybe it was on a Windows PC and it was port 3. If this is a BrightSign device, you'd probably see the number 2 here. There are a whole bunch of triggers and actions you can work with. So the trigger is always, did we get a command? So it's always listening for commands. It could be from any element on any controller connected to the device. So there's a trigger. And then for actions, you can connect or disconnect the device, send an Xscript command or send the command line. So there's more than one way to send commands, as well as setting some port names. So in fact, you can even set the port on the fly if you have a way to deduce it. Particularly useful for Windows because each device, maybe it's a different port. Stay with me on the left. So you see the lightning bolt there on the left for Nexmosphere? Notice there's some lightning bolts here. Every time you see a lightning bolt on something, that means there's an existing trigger action pair, at least one. Could be more than one, there's at least one. And if I hover my mouse over that lightning bolt, you're going to see a long list of stuff. And all of these things are trigger action pairs. Well, remember, there's only one kind of trigger for the Nexmosphere interface asset. It's listening for a command. So all of these things are listening for different commands. That's what's happened here. They're all listening for different commands. I'm going to click this one in particular. When a particular Xscript command is received, notice here it's a type of XR. That's the RFID reader. That's the type of element. It's an XR. The command is PB001. That's from the Xscript command language. It's not Intuiface. It's just how you speak to and listen to an RFID reader with Nexmosphere. If we get a command that says it was an element of type XR with a command of PB01, then set some text. So I'm clicking set text and look at the text we're writing. Tag 1 placed back. PB001 means a tag has been placed back on the RFID reader. There's another command, PB00, I'm not sure, which means tag lifted, all right? And each sensor is associated with a particular tag. You can also get the tag ID, but in this case, it's just the sensor. So we know which sensor, I'm sorry, this is a tag, which tag has been placed back. This is how you build lift and learn in Intuiface. All you do is listen for the right command telling you that some tag has been lifted, and then you react to that event. You could have 5 tags, 10 tags, each is a unique ID. You can uniquely differentiate one sensor from the other, thus one tag from the other, and react to whichever item is lifted and play a video, or navigate to a new scene, or turn the lights on and off, or change the thermostat because you're using the Google Nest Web API to change it. Anything with an API, right? So that's how simple it is to work with Nexmosphere in Intuiface. It applies to all sensors. It applies to all actuators. If it's a sensor, you're listening for the command. If it's an actuator, you're sending the command. But either way, all you're using is Xscript. The syntax is trivial. This is programming that you're seeing on screen, but anybody can do this. In this particular case, if a particular tag is placed back, then set some text, and oh, by the way, log an event for analytics. Super simple to do. So obviously we are flying through the content, so I'm not expecting everybody to be Intuiface geniuses. Just wanted you to understand how you can work with Nexmosphere really easily. So, and Bo reviewed this with you, right? Lift and learn, place and learn, they're just two sides of the same coin. Any kind of gender or age triggered content using the Nexmosphere camera. Of course, there's button presses, and so these are classic scenarios, but working with all the sensors, you can just use motion detection to play a video, right? So there's lots of ways to incorporate Nexmosphere in a retail environment, or from an Intuiface perspective in any environment, doesn't have to be retail. And that goes for actuators as well, right? So maybe if somebody pushes a button, you do something with an LED light strip from Nexmosphere, right? To light something up or to make it flash. All of these things you can do easily. And of course, anytime you want good analytics, by incorporating sensors and actuators, well, sensors in particular, you're learning much more about the environment. You are triggering things based on actions in the environment, which gives you a much richer data set. You know it's a 30-year-old female on a rainy day who tapped that button because you're using the Nexmosphere camera. So all of this information is available, much richer data set. You learn a lot more about your audience. So to wrap things up, how would you get started? The presumption is that either you're already a customer of Nexmosphere's, you can use any controller, you can use any elements. If you're still evaluating Nexmosphere, getting to know them, the demo kit is the best way to do that. Get your hands on a demo kit to explore how they work. And as I mentioned, we provide for free a sample experience pre-built to work with the XN04 demo kit. So at the very least, you can do that. You see how easy it is to build the integration, so you don't need the demo kit, but it makes life easier. There is a couple videos you can watch and information we've posted to our community with details about the integration and how it works. This YouTube video is excellent because it's a step-by-step construction of a scenario reacting to sensor events and doing things on screen. So, and we'll share this information offline. And then, of course, you can contact us, right? So if you're more interested in learning more about Nexmosphere, getting your hands on the demo kit, exploring what other sensor options are available, that's info@nexmosphere.com. Certainly with Intuiface, you can send us questions at info@intuiface.com. I can tell you again that for Intuiface, just go to our website, intuiface.com. There's a Get Free Edition button, and then you're using Composer for free. 100% of capability at no cost. The way we stay in business is a little watermark. You have to be online. And when you're happy with how awesome it is, you can buy a license and those go away. So that is our overview. I know, Bo, that we have a couple of questions that we can get to. Certainly, if people need to go, thank you very much for your time. Again, the webinar has been recorded. So if you do need to leave, we understand. But for those who ask questions, and if you have time to stay, I would very much be happy to answer them. So,
are the questions being recorded as well? I think so, right?
Say it again, sorry.
Are the questions being recorded as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first information is the difference between Intuiface and BrightAuthor. Well, so first of all, Intuiface and BrightAuthor are solving different problems, really. BrightAuthor is solving traditional classic digital signage. It's been around for a few years, does an excellent job of handling traditional digital signage. It has been extended to incorporate certain kinds of interactivity in narrow ways, whereas Intuiface is dedicated to interactivity. That's the point. Certainly you saw in the demo the way you construct an experience is a lot more freedom, whereas BrightSign is the traditional zone assignment kind of CMS. With Intuiface, you have much more freedom. I put back on screen this particular slide where we walk through the Intuiface value proposition. And all of these things we talk about here, the ease and simplicity and the speed with which you can create integrations with third-party data sources, to control every single pixel of a design, to generate very rich sets of analytics and enabling you to create charts and dashboards, to create very responsive and interactive workflows at the edge. All of these things are very interactivity oriented and something Intuiface just does extremely well. It is certainly overkill for traditional digital signage. If you need a classic digital signage screen, Intuiface is more than you need, and BrightAuthor kicks butt there. You could use Intuiface to do both. Certainly, we have customers saying, well, I'll just use Intuiface for both. But BrightAuthor is excellent for traditional signage. When you consider interactivity of any kind, Intuiface is the way to go. And of course, because we make it easy to integrate with third-party sensors, actuators, and APIs, you can easily extend any Intuiface experience into other realms and adopt other kinds of sensors and actuators. Any kind of device, any kind of data source, you make it very easy to incorporate those and pursue additional use cases where you're assuming humans are interacting somehow with speech or with voice or with cameras, RFID. You have lots of freedom to go out of the box. You're not constrained by particular templates or particular approaches. So I hope that answers that question. Bo, if you don't mind, I'll just walk through the list a little bit.
Sure.
Let's see. So there's a couple questions here about analytics, statistics, collecting data. There's a whole charts and dashboards feature, which maybe I can quickly show you. So I'm on my website here. You're gonna.
Yeah, so we do get a lot of questions about this in general, Josh. So it would be really great if you could show us what that looks like within Intuiface.
So you get to see me use LastPass. Don't steal my data. Actually, let me log into this account. And I'm very rich, by the way. Very rich. So if you steal this information, no, I wish. So if you have an Intuiface account, you have access to what we call the My Intuiface website. You can also think of it as the management console. Tons of information accessible through the management console. Capabilities like remote deployment are available through management console, through My Intuiface. Let's talk specifically about analytics. So if you look at the center two columns here, I'm clicking Analytics Dashboards. This brings me to the Charts and Dashboards Creation feature. Sales demo. Maybe I can just do this. Hold on. Oh, that's even better. Okay. This is part of our ISO 27001 certification, all these extra levels of login and such. So on the left, I actually have a couple of dashboards. You can see my first dashboard and trade show dashboard. Everybody will have the trade show dashboard. It's pre-entered in every single Intuiface account. Here you'll see data we collected at a variety of trade shows. The way we collected the data was using that log event action you saw in my demos. There's an action, and you can assign any number of parameters to that action. The parameter could be the item selected, the gender of the viewer, the age of the viewer, the weather outside, the sports score. All of these things are parameters for a single logged event. The actual event could be a button was pressed, motion was detected. Log event logs information about that event and uploads it to what we call the data hub. It's this cloud-hosted database that we maintain. Under the covers, it's Amazon S3, but we call it the Intuiface Data Hub. All the players are independently collecting data from their own edge, from their own device, uploading it to the cloud. And the job of the Data Hub is to collate all that information, make it available for analysis. On screen, you can see one dashboard created for this trade show, which is taking all the information collected from that event and representing it in a variety of ways. There's over 30 different chart types supported in Intuiface Analytics. If you look at the right, I can add a chart. Here I have a set of templates I can choose from or build my own. It's a very simple chart builder. So for example, I could put experience name on the x-axis, and I have elapsed time by experience on the y-axis. And there we go, I just built a line chart. On the left, these are all the parameters collected by the log event action. These parameters in the top are always collected for every data point. You don't have to ask for it. On the bottom, these custom parameters, they're the ones that you specified based on the data you care about. So you can customize all that stuff. And then it's just drag and drop. And I can pre-filter and I can post-filter and I can annotate and I can, I can make this a pie chart instead of a line chart. I mean, all these different ways to build my individual charts. And the result is a set of a dashboard comprised of multiple charts. These charts are connected to the Data Hub, so they're updated live. If you look in the upper right, I can share it and even create a URL. So each dashboard can have one or more unique URLs. You give those URLs to your clients, could be an internal client or an external. And every time they load that page, it's the latest data in the dashboard you created for them. Isn't that cool? So that's what we mean by Intuiface Analytics. Thank you, Bo. Let's see other questions. So we just saw the dashboard. There's a question about a GPIO port. I know that's something that BrightAuthor enables. We can certainly work with that. At the end of the day, it's another, I believe it's a serial port. We have documented in our help center how to approach GPIO. Okay. On the other hand, Nexmosphere has buttons too, so you could use a Nexmosphere button. But if you're using GPIO, I'm sorry?
And button interfaces, so you could connect way more.
That's right. So you could very easily work with a Nexmosphere button using Intuiface and other types of Nexmosphere sensors. But if you want to use GPIO for a generic button, you could do that with Intuiface as well. Can you integrate Intuiface app as an HTML5? So currently, Player is a standalone application that runs natively on the device. So for example, you're using Control Cloud or BrightAuthor connected to remotely provision a BrightSign device with Intuiface Player, and then Intuiface Player is running natively on that device. It looks like Player on any other platform, but it's not something you embed in an HTML frame. It's a standalone thing. We do have a roadmap plan to do something around embedding Intuiface content, but don't wait for that. It's going to be quite a while. Today, no, you cannot embed it in an HTML framework. It's an either or. So you're using Intuiface Player on a BrightSign device, for example, or you're using BrightAuthor or some other third-party CMS. We will send you the recording for the webinar. Don't worry about that. Does Intuiface Nexmosphere only integrate on BrightSign? No. We support, well, so Bo, you're on Android, Windows, BrightSign, and anything else?
Yeah, so, well, basically you can use Nexmosphere with anything that has an RS-232 connection method.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the answer there.
So Nexmosphere could be anywhere that supports that type of connection for specific Intuiface integration, Windows, Android, BrightSign. Those are the three platforms we can work with Nexmosphere on. Question, BrightSign XT1. Yep, there's a question. So yeah, Intuiface works with BrightSign XT3 and XT4. For XT4, that's 1144. So yes, we can work with that. There is a question about pricing structure. So at a high level, every device has its own player, and every player has its own license. Player licensing starts at 240 euros. Or 240 US dollars, depending on where you are. Of course, there's volume discounts and multi-year discounts, that sort of thing. But every device needs a player. Every player needs a license. And player starts at 240. Doesn't matter what platform, Android, BrightSign, doesn't matter. Starts at 240. And then you buy a bunch, price goes down. Is Intuiface running inside BrightAuthor? So I made that clear. No, it's not. And so you, as I mentioned, you can deploy it. You can provision using Control Cloud or BrightAuthor connected. So you don't have to be on site to install Player. It is running natively on the BrightSign hardware. It says BrightSign is Linux based. Well, we've made it, it works. We made it work. When Intuiface is booting on a BrightSign player, it shows the Intuiface logo. Plus firmware version. I mean, if you contact support, there is a way to have what we call a kind of a white label launch. You don't see the Intuiface logo. Of course, for most deployments, your target audience isn't going to see the device boot. It's already going to be running. You're already going to have the experience running. But if you have some concern about a splash screen coming up when you do deployment, we do have a white label option that you can talk to us about. Is it possible to monitor if a sensor was disconnected? So yes on Windows and Android, no on BrightSign. I don't know why, but currently Intuiface will know if a sensor has been connected or disconnected if you're on Windows and Android, but we don't know if it's been connected or disconnected on BrightSign. So you need to make sure it's connected before you launch the experience, should it be running on a BrightSign box. It just is what it is. Maybe it will change one day, but that's how it is now. Can we use Intuiface for both interactive and non-interactive content? Sure, absolutely, yes. As I mentioned, the approach is different. We're not a traditional content assignment to zones sort of CMS. We have a very different paradigm, but certainly we have lots of customers that said, you know what, I'd rather just use one solution than two. So I'm going to use Intuiface to do traditional non-interactive signage as well. You can still do scheduling. You can still do playlists. You can still do all that stuff. It's just done differently because Intuiface came from a different world. Hello, Cyril. Thanks for saying hello. As a distributor, can you roughly tell us your sales channel structure? We sell direct. So you go to our website, you buy licenses. We do have a value-added reseller program giving you discounted access to Player so you can resell it to your clients. I put resell in quotes because technically what you're doing is transferring use of the license. but you're still retaining rights to that license. But there is a way, so you're always buying direct, but with the value-added reseller program, you can get discounted access to Player and then pass that cost along to your clients. You can do that. Question was about BrightSign models. So currently it's only the XT, XT3, XT4. The reason is because it's the highest performance level of all the BrightSign models. And we wanted to make sure that if you want to do 3D models and lots of Nexmosphere sensors and 4K videos, that we're on the highest level model first. We're testing HD and HD. So XD and HD are being tested. We'll let you know. But right now it's XT3, XT4. Again, the question was where to buy Intuiface. Just go to our website. You can get it there. And there was one more question. I'm very excited. Can the Intuiface application run in a browser in production? So again, you cannot embed Intuiface in a browser. You cannot put it in an HTML5 frame. It is Player is a standalone application running natively on the hardware. So if it's an Android Player, you can get, by the way, you can get Player in Google Play. If it's Windows, it's an executable that you install. If it's BrightSign, it's something you can provision. But it's all running natively in the hardware. You're not embedding it. It is not in a browser. You can go offline with Intuiface. It's not in a browser. You don't have to be online to use Intuiface. Once you've installed Intuiface on your BrightSign player, once you've downloaded and have the experience on that BrightSign player, you can take it offline, and it's going to work perfectly fine. There's a question about BrightSign firmware. Good question, because right now you need to get it from Intuiface. So BrightSign was originally going to put us in the 8.0 stream for firmware. Ultimately decided they would first incorporate us in the 8.1 firmware stream. So 8.1 should be available within the next month, I think. Don't quote me. It's BrightSign's timeline. Right now, if you want to get the 8.0 version of the firmware supporting Intuiface, you need to go to our website. If you go to the help center that I showed you for the Nexmosphere article, just type in BrightSign, you'll find the article about BrightSign, and in there you'll have the link to the BrightSign firmware. So right now you do need to get the firmware from us. We'll be part of the 8.1 firmware development stream once BrightSign goes live with it, okay? No, I'm not going to read that question aloud, but I do love, my favorite movie is, now I'm blanking on it. It's the David Mamet movie where, what the heck's it called? I love this movie so much, I'm blanking on the title. Where they're all salespeople, and Alec Baldwin says, "Put that coffee down. Coffee is for closers." Love that movie. I'm blanking on the name, but it's one of my favorites. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Thank you for sticking around. It's a long webinar. I'm well aware of that, but there is a very hopeful question about running Intuiface on the Raspberry Pi. So the short answer is no. It's far too underpowered currently. However, we're investigating that for the future. If we develop a version of Intuiface Player that can run in an HTML5 framework, then maybe we can also extend it to platforms like Raspberry Pi running natively on Linux. In theory, why not? Not tomorrow, not next month, not in the next 6 months, so don't wait for it. Certainly not today, but maybe in the future. Glengarry Glen Ross. Love that movie. So rewatchable. Great masterclass in acting.
Well, since we're all at home, we have something to watch tonight.
It's not fun. It's not an uplifting movie. If you want a happy movie, don't watch Glengarry Glen Ross. But if you want something that's just wonderful, it's excellent. Arduino is the same for Raspberry Pi. I appreciate your optimism. Not on Arduino either. The full list, if I go back to that graphic I showed you before, if you look here on the right of that graphic, mute that, you can see Windows, Android, BrightSign, Tizen for Samsung Smart Signage Platform, WebOS for LG Smart Displays, iOS on the iPad, not the iPhone, but the iPad, and the Chrome operating system. Those 7 platforms, not Arduino, not Raspberry Pi. The newest BrightSign version is higher. So this is a question about the firmware. Again, if you want to use Intuiface, don't use the firmware on the BrightSign website. Go to support. BrightSign is not incorporating our integration in the 8.0 firmware stream. That's happening in 8.1. It is what it is. So if you want to use Intuiface on BrightSign, you need to get the 8.0 firmware from us. So you go to our website. Don't go to the BrightSign website. Okay. You're very welcome. Glad you liked it. Any other questions? Anybody? We are recording this thing, so we will make the recording available. It'll be on YouTube. You know, we'll send you the link, but it'll be. Would we make it unlisted? I don't know. I'll talk to you about it, Paul. I don't know if it needs to be unlisted, but it's up to you. You're very welcome, everybody. Thank you for the thanks. I'll give you one more chance to ask any questions. Of course, it's never too late. You got the 2 info@email addresses. As I mentioned, you've got, for Intuiface, you've got free evaluation, 400 article online library, over 50 pre-built samples, including one with Nexmosphere. Free support, by the way, user community, tons of stuff. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. I'm looking. Anybody typing? Thank you very much, everybody. And Bo, thank you very much for hosting this webinar.
You too, Jeff. Thanks so much for all your information.
All right. Take care, everybody.
You guys soon.
Also, take care, all.
Bye.
Bye.